And we're back in the workshop studio here in Cape Town, South Africa. And today we've got a special guest, Sasha Kozinsky from Finfloor. Welcome, Sasha. Welcome back.
Thank you, Barry, for having us here today. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about engineered wood and specifically FinOak itself, and just delve into more information around engineered wood. And hopefully after today's session, we can all learn a little bit more about the pros and cons of good old engineered oak wood flooring.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding what's available in the marketplace and what product suits you and your application, because so often, potentially, we get excited about something, but is it actually suitable for our situation?
100%.
I think that's quite an important, let's understand the basics before we dive into the detail.
Engineered flooring was actually invented by Cars in 1947, and they were the first manufacturer to manufacture engineered hardwood, a multi-layer floor.
Yeah.
Engineered flooring, there's different varieties. At the end of the day, they may all look the same, but they are not created the same. In terms of engineered wood flooring, how it is potentially what makes it different to a real wood floor is that a real wood floor traditionally is 20 mil thick, and it would have the exotic timber throughout, whether it was oak, maple, beech, walnuts, all those beautiful exotic timbers.
I've got an image like a cowboy saloon. We're walking in, clunk clunk with our spurs, and that solid wooden floor that we all fall in love with.
Correct.
And that's what we're trying to emulate. But
100%.
now we're taking it to the next level where we're adding that engineered component, and that's what you're talking about now.
Correct. So back to your traditional wood, it was generally 20 mil thick or 22 mil thick. You had random widths, random lengths. A traditional method of installation would be to either nail it down, glue it down, put it on joist battens, etc. We used to do that in South Africa with the Oregon pine flooring and all the African woods like rosewood, Rhodesian teak. But we'll all know that living in those homes when we're growing up is that wood can move. It can expand and contract, especially in winter. I'm talking coming from Joburg. In winter it used to contract, it shrinks, and then in summer it did the opposite. We were also very limited in terms of color because you had your cherries, your maples, your beeches, and then traditionally dark redwoods. So there were a few negatives, or not negatives, downfalls on solid wood, actual real solid wood flooring. Restrictions, but also we are cutting down these exotic, beautiful trees, and we are making a product that's 20 or 22 mil throughout with a very expensive, beautiful timber. However, you could never utilize the entire plank, because when you have a tongue and groove product, whether it's engineered or solid, you can never sand below the actual tongue and groove or the floor which splits open. So you are actually only ever using the 6 millimeter of real wood on top, which meant that we're actually just wasting trees.
Wasting resources, we're not into that.
We're not into that. So what engineered does allow is that it gives you the same look and feel. So traditionally you'll have different thicknesses of, and now today we're talking about oak because oak is more versatile. It's actually it's hard from a wearability point of view. And because of the oak color, it gives us the choice to go very light, or it gives us the choice to go medium or dark colors. So there's a lot more option here with oak. But in terms of the makeup and what makes an engineered wood specifically different to a solid piece of wood is that you can have from 0.6 mil of a veneer on top up to 6 millimeter of real oak, like I mentioned on a solid piece of oak plank. And the difference being is that it's constructed in a different way. So the way a 3-ply engineered product is constructed is your oak will run lengthways. You will then have your core, which is the center part of the product, which is still made from real wood, traditionally poplar, pine, spruce, sometimes heavier, and even now you get oak cores, which is called tri-layer oak. But generally, it would be from a eucalyptus tree.
So a little bit more cost effective.
Correct.
faster growing.
Correct.
So we can really balance and optimize the resources accordingly.
And very stable.
Yeah.
So basically coming back to a 3-ply, you'll have your oak running lengthways. You then have your core, which is made otherwise known as fillets, running in the opposite direction. And you'll notice they allow some gaps in between the fillets for the expansion and contraction to take place within the board. And then you have your balancing backing layer running lengthways again. And the reason being is that, number one, by manufacturing in this way, we can make wider boards. You can go up to 450 mil width now, which we've never seen with a solid wood.
So solid wood, traditionally, we could go a max of maybe 135 mil before it actually naturally starts cupping.
Correct.
And we don't like the cupping. We want flat boards.
No, we don't want it to look like an ocean. So we want a flat floor, and that's 100% correct. So besides the width, we can go up to 4 meter length in planks. Yeah. Traditionally, your standard size boards in South Africa would be a 190, a 220, 260, sometimes up to 300. And the length of your boards are generally around 1900 up to about 2.2, 3 meters in length.
I think that's the middle market of where we can find generally most products.
Correct. Another nice thing about engineered wood is that you can have more control over the lengths of your product. So in terms of when you used to buy bundles of solid wood flooring or decking, you could get random widths, random lengths. And unfortunately in South Africa, our market doesn't like putting a small plank in the middle of the floor. They see that as a reject offcut.
Yeah.
So with engineered wood, when Finfloor purchase, we request 75% nesting in a box, which means if there's 6 planks, we will get 5 full planks, and if the 6th plank will be made up of a 300, 600, 900, which you use for your starters and finishes. Because
along the side of the room, which you're naturally going to have to cut anyway.
You're naturally going to have to cut it anyway.
Yeah.
So in terms of the 3-ply construction, the balancing backing layer is very important because that's what also keeps the board straight.
Yep.
Because you got the forces from this way, opposite direction, and backing layer. Also, when you make a 3-ply, because it's basically made of 3 layers, there's far less glue. And we don't want to use lots of glue because we want a clean, green product. So the less glue that's used, the better for the product. But it's very important to use the right glue that keeps the products bonded and kept together. And that's why Finfloor offer a 25-year structural warranty on the product.
So when you have natural water vapor traveling through the product, which happens in most installations, and your moisture barriers will limit the moisture traveling through the product, but that water vapor does attack the glue, and that's where you want highly water-resistant adhesives. And also there's less machining involved when you're doing the 3-layer versus doing a multiply system. So the production and potentially the costs as well
100%.
is all optimized.
And
Optimization.
And that's why you actually will find that all your large, big engineered manufacturers traditionally will make a 3-ply core. It was the Chinese that started making a multiply core. And the reason is that they could do it at a lot cheaper price, and they had a lot more of the raw materials available closer to their factories.
Yep.
So when you go onto a multiply board, they're exactly the same in terms of the look and feel, because you have an oak top face, which I mentioned could be from a 2 mil, a 3 mil, a 6 mil, and down to a 0.6 mil, which would be a veneer. Obviously, the different thicknesses of oaks will determine how they cut the tree. So you get a rotary slice, which is traditionally used for veneers, where it's a rotary cut and they peel it. And then that's what they'll use as the top layer. Then you get a sawn cut, a veneer cut. You get all different types of cuts, which we will go through in later detail. And actually, we have a video we can show you. So again, oak is oak, but it's also a hard cut. It's also, we'll get to about the grades, etc., and where it comes from in the tree. But without me going off track, let's talk about multiply. So multiply is just made up in a different manufacturing way. In terms of, you still will have your top oak the same way as a 3-ply. You will still have your balancing backing layer, same as 3-ply, to keep the product stable. However, with multiply, you have up to 4 to 9 layers of plywood core.
All at cross angles.
Well, good question. So a good multiply factory will always cross-hatch their layers, because by cross-hatching their layers, that's what gives you the stability. And again, you don't have the cupping, where some factories will take shortcuts, and as they'll have their oak, they'll have their plywood layers and their balancing layer running all in the same direction, and then we have that problem where it starts to cup.
I think what we can say in anything that is produced, you have all different variable scales of quality and durability and structural performance.
Yeah.
So I think with regards to the majority of what I'm seeing in the marketplace is a 3-ply structure.
Correct.
It is beautiful, stable, meets the price point, and delivers on performance. I'm not seeing too much of the multiply of late, and I think it's more of the wild card importers and wholesalers that are moving something a little bit more curated and bespoke. In my perspective.
No, you're 100%. And coming back to that, I mean, the stats don't lie. That 3-ply is definitely a world market leader in terms of the product, because of how stable the product is.
It's proven.
You know, here's one of our 260mm boards that come from overseas, Prefinished. It's just very stable. And a lot of the expansion will take place within the board, as opposed to, you know, once it's all clicked together. In terms of other engineered makeups that you get in the marketplace, Finfloor also import a HDF core with a 2mm real oak top face. And people say, well, we're nervous of HDF. I don't know why we're nervous of HDF.
Technology, as I've just said, technology, there's variable scales of quality and performance. And I must admit, I'm quite excited about the HDF version, because technology has advanced. We know you have the reputation with your laminates.
Thank you.
Of having absolutely excellent high density core boards that are stable, highly water resistant. And if the technology is there, why don't we use it? And like this product, it delivers. It delivers beautifully.
Well, 100%, Barry. So when we import products, Finfloor imports products into South Africa, we don't import it based on what works in Europe. We import based on what works in the Southern Hemisphere, not just South Africa. We've discussed this in videos before. We don't live the same, and we don't live in climatically controlled homes. Our UV rays are totally different. So when we're talking about HDF, whether it's for laminates or whether it's for our engineered board that we bring in, the density is increased. The higher the density, the further the floor can lay without having to have profiles in there. The more stable the product is. These days you can, which we do with my majority of our products, is that we actually wax impregnate the whole HDF board. So I'm not just talking wax the joins, I'm talking in a factory. The whole HDF is wax impregnated, which helps with water resistant properties. And HDF's very stable. We've been fitting laminate floors for many, many years. And if you have a good high density board, it can do exactly what you need. And there's some beautiful products in our market right now that we don't sell that are coming out with HDF cores with a 6mm veneer, with an aluminium oxide overlay. They look great, they look real. The only negative part is that you can never sand it. Where with our 2mm HDF oak, you can still get a sand out of that type of product.
Absolutely. I think, you know, just getting back for one extra little point on the HDF core is that locking mechanism, when it's machined from a stable, strong core board, just adds a whole lot of peace of mind when you're clicking those boards together.
Yeah, you got that meat on the bone. So there's no shearing and locking systems breaking.
You don't have to be sweating when you do
Unless it's on a floor like that, then anything will break.
No, absolutely.
So I suppose, you know, when it comes to engineered, when you put it on a table like that and you just look at the oak, you know, everything looks the same. It's then you've got to dig down deeper into the product.
One key point that I keep on chatting to customers about is that what is the application? What is your situation for the project? Because some projects, like some of these, are a 100-year floor. They can last 100 years, no problem. when we start looking at maybe what some of the veneer floors or the 2 mil or products that are maybe going to be a little bit harder to sand, or you're not going to have enough meat on the bone to sand multiple times, those are potentially floors that, hey, you know, if you're installing in your home and you only intend to be there for 5-10 years, or it's a retail application, that understand the timeline and what you're using the floor for versus just chasing, hey, the Joneses have got a 6 mil floor, I need to have a 6 mil floor. Because you'll only really know about that wear layer and that thick board when you're paying for it.
100%. And I mean, the reality is, before you worry about what the Joneses have, do you have enough height in your own home to put a 26 mil floor plus your glue and floor prep? And the reality is that we're not asking you to live like Europe, where you must take your shoes off when you walk in the door. But we are saying, if you have a good walk on and a walk-off mat, and if you put felt pads underneath your furniture, your engineered floor should last for a lifetime. And most of the time, that on your first, maybe after 5, 6, 7 years, depends how you maintain the floor, which is always key. And that's another discussion I'm sure we'll get into later, is that your first sand may not always be a sand, because you may not have scratched and gouged the floor. So your first sand sometimes is actually just a deep buff and a re-oil. Depends if it was oil, depends if it has a lacquer or what type of sealer it had on. But even if it does have a sealer and it's just the dirt is built up in the grains, the reality is that you don't always have to do a sand. And in my view, and what I have seen, if you are using like a modern day, and I use like a Boner floor sander, you can set it to 0.6, you can set it to 1 mil. It's not like an old drum sander where you did it by eye.
The Flexi Sand are beautiful machines.
So the reality is that for every mil, you can get a sand. So if you have a 4 mil floor, you can get 4 sands out of it, plus potentially that first deep clean re-oil buff. And you should only be sanding every 10 years.
This brings us on to a really important topic where we start talking about coatings. Because initially, clients aren't thinking about how many times they can sand their floor. That's usually the follow-on attributes that they will then get sold to by the sales reps. But coatings, everybody's walking in and they've got like a color swatch and they're like, I'm chasing this color, I want that kind of finish. And this becomes a massive discussion point for me, where you have the lacquers and then you have oil coatings and you have different gauges, and some products last, you know, they can handle a little bit of abuse. And other products, like, they look great in the showroom or when the planks are being unpacked, but give that floor 3 to 6 months, it's looking horrible. And the clients are pulling their hair out and saying, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, well, where do we start? I mean, when we started importing engineered flooring from Finfloor back in 2003, we only ever imported pre-finished. And it worked. And okay, back then the glosses were a little bit higher, so they scratched a little bit easier. They had 7 layers of lacquer on, and obviously that technology's way improved in the last 19 years. But coming back to your question, is that one of the reasons why Finfloor also moved to an unfinished range is that I could have 20 pre-finished colors, but there was always a color in between that the client or architect or designer wanted. So eventually, you know, we followed some of our competitors in the market by bringing in unfinished, and then we started giving the clients the options locally on what color oil they could put on. So what was very popular going back 10 years ago specifically, and can work, is just an oil finish. And basically you're taking the natural oak product, which is raw, and you can either apply an oil where it's done in a factory through a coating line. You could do it by hand off site, or you can do it on site, and the guys normally use a buffing machine to actually apply it. And when you put an oil finish down, you get your color, and yes, it does protect the wood and helps with some water resistance. But the problem is it's just a surface coat, and it's just sitting on top, and the grains of the oak and the pores of the oak are still open. So the problem, what happens is that if you just put an oil finish down and you go install it, and then you don't use the right soaps to clean it, and potentially using something that's harmful and could be stripping the oil off, and then it's a dry winter, and then it's in a window we have a lot of UV rays coming through. Generally what happens is that oil finish board will mark a lot easier from fatty foods, red wines. It will dry out and look dull. It looks boring, like it's got no life. And worst case scenario, what happens is that the boards start to have splinter cracks in it, because it needs to be nourished. Now, I don't get it, quickly going off track. I don't understand it, because, when we were young, I always remember my mother was putting, I think it was beeswax on the leather furniture, on the parquet. I used to do it with play a game and go around and put cobra wax on. Why? Because we're nourishing it. You buy an expensive car, you take it to it, washed at the car wash once a week, once every month or two, you get a polish.
It requires maintenance.
It requires maintenance.
Care.
Why don't we do it on our floor? So in a nutshell, when you're buying an oiled floor, you must know that you need to maintain it. Or even better, ask the company that installs it to come in every 6 months with a refresh or with maintenance oil, just to keep that board nourished.
I think there's definitely a place in the market for oiled and hard wax floors. Like some of them, like they really do deliver. And I know the technology is advancing.
Correct.
But I think it's when we are selling the products, and we need to understand that there's all these different genres of a particular engineered product that you need to be aware of. And some of these products require a maintenance program.
Correct.
And if you're not aware of that maintenance program right from the onset, like if you're going to buy a Ferrari, there's one thing being able to afford the Ferrari, but can you actually afford the maintenance program and the service plan of that Ferrari? And I think that this is a critical component where there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, where people are potentially, they get excited about a color, and we all get excited about a color. I understand that.
Yeah.
But when you get excited about a color with a finish that either needs a maintenance program or doesn't need a maintenance program, and are you aware of that up front, where you can actually see like, well, they look very similar. Maybe there's a little bit of a sheen variance or whatever, but one's a slightly different price to the other. And I know we are price driven. There's a lot of, like, the market's driven by price points. It's very competitive. And how these variables that the client is not necessarily educated on,
Sure,
or aware of when they're whipping out that credit card.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think the reality is you need to understand how the client's going to live. Do they entertain a lot?
Yeah.
Are they prepared to do the maintenance?
Is it a wine farm?
Is it a wine farm? A red wine? Do the stain test. And the reality is that you can use a hard wax oil. You can use any oil. But then there are options which just cost a little bit more money, where you can put a nice water-based 2K sealer on top of the floor.
Yeah.
It comes in a matte finish, so it will keep it looking very natural. You can have it in a satin, which is a semi-gloss finish. And if you like that high gloss finish look, you can also have it in a high gloss finish. But by putting that additional 2 or sometimes 4 coats of 2K sealer, or a sealer of your choice, over the board, it closes the pores, it closes the grains, and that's what makes the product more durable. It keeps it doesn't mark and stain as easy, it doesn't crack as easy, and it also gives it that little bit extra bit of life, which is what people like.
I think ultimately we get excited about these products, but like when you start saying, well, listen, I also want to live on my floors. I've got my kids and my pets, and like I want to entertain, and I want to show them my beautiful home and these floors, but I don't want to worry about them.
Yeah.
I want to live on them. And I think that's where those kind of coatings add a lot of value
100%.
Without having to get into the worry of when is the right time to do a maintenance coat, and like, that little peripheral canary.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
100%. And I guess that's why Finfloor went back to also importing factory pre-finish from overseas.
Yeah.
So we offer 2 different options to our clients now. We bring in 6 different variations from overseas, And when a product comes from overseas, you have a lot more control of coloring and of the products in the factory because you have a whole production line. So besides the starting out point is that when we buy from factories, we go overseas and rustic grade's just not rustic. You get A all the way down to E, F, G, H.
Yeah.
So it's about how you select your products in the first place in terms of what percentage of B and C am I allowed in this, with a little bit of E and F because we like a little bit of knots and cracks. It's also about discussing how long the acceptable cracks are in a board, how long your knots are, how big or wide your knots should be. So those are all the things that we went over and discussed with our factories. Moisture content. What the moisture content for a board in South Africa versus maybe overseas, Europe or cold countries, completely different. So we have a set standard to what our moisture content should be. But getting back to why we went back to pre-finished is that besides all those reasons I mentioned, is that when they send the boards down the oiling line, they can see if there's a real pink board that sticks out, that you only find out when you do it on site and it's already fitted. Because only when you put the oil over sometimes does the coloring pull through.
Yeah.
So that's controlled in the factory. In terms of any boards that where I mentioned the cracks or knots are too big or there's holes in it and they haven't been prepared properly, they can eliminate that. But the most important thing is that in our factory, and I think it's the same for most majority or big engineered factories, is besides all the selection process, when they putting it through, it will get 3 to 4 coats of primer/oil, okay? Then it gets 2 to 4 coats of a sealer, okay? And then it goes through curing tunnels, where UV curing tunnels, where it has up to 9 UV curing tunnels, so it dries quicker. It also, the curing tunnels makes the product harder. You don't get, it's an even spread when it's applied.
Sasha, the way that the customer experiences this, of all this curation of how these products go through a proper international production line, is the consistency of that finish when they get it into their home.
Correct.
And I think you can quite definitely see when a product has gone through as you're explaining, a fantastic in-depth production process versus when things are done potentially a little bit more offhand locally. There is definitely an aesthetic experiential difference in the two levels.
100%. And I mean, as mentioned, we also have now 8 different unfinished engineered boards that we import.
Because there are those jobs that you cannot have a pre-finished board for. You want to do something custom.
I need to match someone's product. I need to get to the architects what they have visualized. So that's why we bring in unfinished. And the reality is that I'm not saying that when we pre-finish here on site or in South Africa, it's bad. I'm saying, like you said, overseas there's a lot more control and you are getting a higher grade product. Because when you finish locally, and I can only speak for the oiling lines I know of, and obviously I can't go into all oiling lines, but the reality is that how it works here in South Africa, it's generally 1 coat of oil that's naturally dried. Some people have 1 or 2, curing lines,
UV
but
curing lines,
I don't know of anyone having 9. Could be wrong. And then once that's dry, then they will apply 1 coat of a 2K sealer, let it naturally dry again, give it an intermediate sand, and then apply the 2nd coat. So you're definitely getting the durability, and it's far better than just the oiled finish.
Yeah.
But doesn't have all the bells and whistles and extra coats like it does from overseas. And then obviously finishing on site, as I mentioned, you can fit the floor. It all looks great. You might be lucky enough for, that other contractors haven't spilt other products. onto your floor where it's still raw, because when it's raw, even if I take my finger and put it on a raw board, the oil in my finger will mark the plank.
Impact the stain later, at a later date.
So what happens sometimes is that now the contractor, he's got everyone out, and now he comes and he wants to apply his oil, and he does it, and now there's a plank that's pink or plank that's dark, and now what does he do? He has to just tell the client which it is. It's real wood. That's what you got to. That's what happens. But the client now doesn't like that because it's sticking out like a sore thumb.
I think you really just you started to scratch on a really big topic there with regards to installers and their skill level to do on-site staining and sealing and or management of site.
Yeah.
Where there is a limit on the available high-level skilled artisans that we have here in South Africa. Like
Sure.
it's an issue that we're addressing.
Yeah.
But when you start getting involved with a pre-finished product, it's a lot simpler, a lot safer. The handover of the product from production through to the end consumer, there's a lot less risk of something going amiss with your coating, where you're going to get things that are going to jump out of inconsistent stain or a plank or a knot or contaminated surfaces before it's been sealed. And I think that's really what brings a great sense of security to me when I'm selling a pre-finished product, is that it's contained and it's safe.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back to what you're saying is that, yes, we are, and through your great work, we're trying to build a better installer base with a lot of more knowledge. And I think this is the reasons why we do these videos together, is to impart our knowledge. However, it's not always just the installer. It's what happens when the installer's just finished his job and he's done a great job at it, and he's now packed up and left sites, and he's left a note on the door, please don't walk on the floor for 24, 48 hours, and the little dog runs across the floor, or the other contractor that didn't care, or the owner's so proud, he comes home and he walks on the floor, and then the next day the poor installer gets a phone call to say, my floor's marked and it's got all footprints. That's what happens. And
reality.
And sometimes, as an owner who I go to a site to inspect when there's an unfortunate breakdown of on sites, is that, for me to walk into a home where a client hasn't even moved into their brand new home, they've made a massive investment on an engineered floor, and the client's standing there saying, but look, my floors are marking, even when I just put cream on my feet in the morning, or I just put a glass of water down, it's marking, or whatever the case may be. So again, coming back to an oiled finish, is that if you use the right products and you maintain it and you understand what you're buying and you understand the benefits, and there are benefits of an oil finish, because if I scratch an oil finish, I can come just with the same color oil and reapply it, because there's no sealer on. Yeah. So if you understand all of that, then it's fine. That's why I'm such a big fan of using a lacquered or a floor that is sealed. Now you get different types of water-based sealers. You used to get your old, sealers that had higher toxic or weren't as VOC friendly. But these days, with our water-based sealers, they can be applied over an oil, and it is a lacquer. And as I mentioned earlier, you can have up to 4 to 8 layers of that applied to the board afterwards without making it look too high gloss, because we don't want to go high gloss, because that can also scratch sometimes.
Yeah.
But by having that peace of mind, by having that sealer, lacquer,
so you've sealed in the goodness and you protected it. It's like your armor.
Basically, it's like that extra layer of polish or protection you've put on top of your car, because you don't want it just to scratch. You don't want the sun to dry it out. You want to be able to put a glass of wine down, and you want to live on your floor. If you can't live on your floor, what's the? You might as well buy a laminate or a vinyl, or you must walk around barefoot and not enjoy your floor.
No, absolutely. Sasha, just to finish this off, like, you've got some pre-finished lacquered options.
Yes.
Like, They represent beautiful. They're named after beautiful mountain ranges here in South Africa. Can you, like, I know they're popular, but can you just explain a little bit and give us a little bit of an introduction to them?
Yeah, so basically, in terms of our pre-finished options, we brought in three variations. Basically, we have three colors one is called Otanikwa, one's called Maluti, and one's called Cedarburg. Those three products are basically on a 15.4 190mm board. So what I mean by that, it's 15mm thick with a 4mm of real oak top face.
Yep.
They all are treated, prepared a little bit differently in the factory. So this plank I'm holding specifically, and sorry, what I forgot to mention is also 1900 in the length.
Yep.
So it's a nice long board, and you get 8 panels in a box. But this Maluti that I'm holding up here, this is the treatment that this has had in the factory. It's whitewashed, which means that they've put an initial white coating on first.
Yep.
Let it dry, wipe it off, so you get the white that sits in the grain.
Yeah.
It's also been lightly brushed, enabled for the white to sit in the grain. And obviously, you know, you can run your fingernails across it and you can feel the brushing.
I want to add a side note. Wire brushing or brushing your engineered oak planks. Did you know that it actually adds wear resistance?
Because you're getting to the harder wood.
Correct,
There
correct.
you go.
So what happens is that when you wire brush a board, you're actually removing some of the soft wood.
Yeah.
So the fast-growing seasonal wood, and you're leaving behind the denser, harder growing seasonal wood. And basically all the top surface, which you now feel as that texture, is the high density option.
Correct.
And that is highly scratch resistance versus if you had a smoothly sanded plank and you had to try and scratch it, it scratches predominantly in the soft wood.
100%, Barry.
Naughty badge to me.
Hey, well, you've been reading up well. So this, besides having a whitewash oil, this comes from the oil that this factory uses specifically. Is called Klump Coatings. It's a German product.
We love Klump.
They've been around a long time.
They know it well. They know it well.
You must always use a trusted, oiling and sealing company, someone that's been around a long time. It's normally American wood oil, Klump, Osmo, Monocoat, Loba, Wackle, Bona. Those are all your big boys out there. Coming back to the Maluti board, so it's got the whitewashed oil and it's got a UV lacquered finish.
All right, talk to us about UV lacquers, like sun resistant.
Sun resistant. It will, real wood does oxidize. So generally, real wood will go darker with age.
Yep.
Especially with the UVs. But by using these new technology UV lacquered, like Invisible Protects oils, it will keep the product nice and natural looking without going yellow and without changing color too much. But also just helps, again, as you say, against the UV rays, which normally dry out the boards.
Yeah.
And, give us a whole load of, headaches that we experience here in South Africa because we don't have double, triple glazed, windows. And when we're hot, we open our windows and sliding doors and the sun beams down on our floor.
That it does.
What else can I tell you about this board? This board is a 3-ply core and it has a waxed fold down locking system. So that means this product has come standard with a locking system that is a patent locking system that we have to pay to use this technology.
Okay.
But we also apply some wax to the join because we all know that when water or cleaning materials sit here on top, there's no issue. When it goes in the joints, that's where you generally get
the
more.
Achilles heel.
Yeah. So by putting some wax on the joins, it also helps prevent any spillages and peaking on the joins.
But you've got a click system here. Now, obviously, that opens up quite a wide variety of installation options for us.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. And the reality is that we bring in a click system specifically because when you manufacture 3-ply, you have an option to make it in a click system or a tongue and groove. As opposed to if you manufacture a multi-ply, you can only have it in a tongue and groove because of the way the construction works. If you try and make a locking system, it will just snap and break off. It will fall apart.
Yep.
So coming back to the benefits of what a 3-plug click system can give you is that we can float it, and we can generally go in an uncontrolled environment 12 by 12, which 12 meters in length,
Yep.
12 in width. Why would you want to float? It's a quicker, cheaper installation. Sometimes we don't have the subfloor, we don't have the budget to do the subfloor preparation.
It's not strong enough.
It's not strong
maybe
enough.
There's some moisture movement issues, etc.
Access floors.
floors.
You can't glue it. You'd need to float it. Even talk to me about laying over old Oregon pine floors. It can
Absolutely.
be done. Just
Yeah.
make sure you have air vents and the floor can breathe underneath. But coming back to your question, Barry, is that yes, with my product, it gives you the option to float it, and you can put it on a normal combi lay. You can put it on a sound acoustic underlay like a FinXPE or whatever else is in the market, and you have the option to glue it down. And why would you glue it down? You glue it down because sometimes people do want a softer feel underfoot, which glue down does give you. It can go greater distances, a bigger allowable floor coverage, so you
Less
don't
transition trims and
acoustics, run it through doorways.
Yeah.
There's always a finishing detail where we don't want a big oak trim and we want something
You
small.
architects and interior designers.
The headaches you give us. But then we can always, we've got a solution for all your
There
challenges.
is an option, but be prepared to potentially up your budget just a little bit.
Correct. So the click system definitely gives us both choices in terms of installation methods.
Yeah, nice versatility.
I have to quickly mention on a tongue and groove multiply because this is an industry learning video.
Absolutely.
A multiply only comes in a tongue and groove. And generally, if you look at your old tongue and grooves, you'll see how much longer your old tongue was. And the right way to install this product in South Africa is not to put it on a combi lay, and you do not just glue the tongue and groove.
No.
And the reason being is that when winter comes, the glue crystallizes, it snaps, it breaks open, you sweep, you clean, you have a whole load of dirt that goes in there. In the opposite season, it now tries to close and it can't. So the only way to install this product is a glue down. And you can either snake it on the back where you apply your glue like that,
Full
or the best is a full bonded glue down.
All right, they are also doing, on Joyous, they'll do the bead of flooring adhesive and nail. So there are a couple of options there, but
On a 20mm board only. You couldn't do that on a 15. There's not enough, it doesn't have it, unless your joists are...
no, in Joyous, yes, but if you've got a ply subfloor...
Correct.
And this is where there are options there. But like all of a sudden your costing is climbing quite rapidly.
And don't forget Elastalon you could use.
There is Elastalon as well. Lovely product. That's an adhesive mat that's also a floating system. And the planks remain individually separate. They're not bonded together. That's on a TNG system. The Elastalon is not designed specifically for a click-lock floor system.
And I think just coming back to our Finfloor pre-finished products that we'd started off talking about, which as usual, went off on another track.
Because we love our subject so much.
We're just passionate. Is that we also have 3 variations, which are called Winterberg, Sugar Bush, and Tsitsikamma. And this comes in a standard size board, which is a 14.3. 1900 long, 260 wide.
The 260 wide plank.
Delicious.
Absolutely delicious.
And the beautiful thing about this product, coming back to the dimensions, so 14.3 as opposed to 15.4 means 14 mil total thickness, 3 mil of real wood, 260 is the width, 1900 is the length. This specific board that I have in my hand, Barry, is our Winterberg. As I was mentioned earlier, it has a matte lacquered finish, which gives us that nice matte natural appearance.
Oh, delicious.
Stunning. It has the invisible UV Loba Protect product on it, which keeps the product this natural oak color without going to yellow or changing color.
Sanded look, and then Loba cementing it in. It's like a winning combination.
It is. And when I found out my factory could give us this Loban Visible Protect, I said, great, I'm on it. And we did it in our Winterberg in the 260, and then we did it in our Cedarburg in our 190 more option. And it really, really is doing well. And this has a very light brushed effect, also a click system, where, as we discussed previously, it gives you the two different installation options. There are two other products that we have them here, but just very quickly, they are smoked. And they're not smoked as in smoked, they're smoked in a kiln. And the reason, you can either smoke a product, the oak, or you can fume the oak. And normally they put in a kiln with ammonia. Why do they do that? Because when they do it, it can change the color of the oak naturally. So when you're fuming it, it will actually traditionally go this type of color. And when you smoke it, it will go normally a darker gray color. You can still apply your white oils and your different...
Change it up and get creative. Yeah.
But what's really nice about when you smoke or fume a product is that the actual color goes all throughout the oak.
Permeates all the way through.
Thank you. So why is that nice? That if you did manage, well, not happen or manage, but if you did scratch or damage your floor, you don't get this white oak sticking through. It will be the same color throughout. And those are just all the tricks of the trade. I mean, they've been smoking and fuming oaks, timbers for years.
Yeah.
But now some of the oiling companies are getting so clever that you can actually buy, bottles of fuming, liquids from them without having to do it in the factories and the kilns. You can buy reactive stains or chemically reactive stains, which essentially do the same job. It will push the cost up. But if you want to give a customer something that's really different and niche, there's an opportunity to do so.
Getting back to the basics is that engineered is one of the most highly desired flooring products that we have in our bouquet at the moment.
Correct.
We're all aspiring for the engineered oak. And with living in South Africa, we have a variable skill base.
Yeah.
So what happens when you come and you start exploring a pre-finished engineered oak system is that you're getting security that you're going to be able to bank and secure that end aesthetic that you're desiring without the risk of on-site application or complex installation methods and finishing production lines where you've got the security to get that aesthetic quickly, efficiently, and move on.
Yeah, I think less maintenance and a good return on your investment, because at the end of the day, you're spending a lot of money on an oak floor, and you want it to last a long time. So again, with a pre-finished, or whether it's pre-finished from in a factory here or if it's from overseas, it's just, you can live on your floor, you can enjoy your floor, and you don't have to worry about telling people, oh, please take your shoes off. Please don't do this. You can't. Then you can't enjoy that type of living.
No, absolutely. And when I'm presenting engineered oak, I see it as an investment.
Big time.
When it goes into your home or your project, it adds value to that building. When you sell it at a later date, you are specifying, like 5 bedrooms, a swimming pool, engineered oak wooden floors. It elevates the value. So the money that you're putting into the investment, you're actually going to recoup when you sell your home again at a later date.
100%. And I mean, we see it now even in new developments. They will make it known that you have oak floors in these developments, because it is a selling feature.
So if you're looking at flipping a unit, go for a thinner oak wear layer. If you're looking for your own investment, potentially you can go with a thicker wear layer.
Correct. And I mean, just on that statement alone, is that what's very popular these days is cladding walls and receptions
ceilings.
And ceiling and bulkheads.
So gorgeous.
So why take a 20 or a 15.4 board that's heavy, you'll need a lot more joists, there'll be a lot more complicated installation.
I don't want to be the guy standing trying to sand that floor in years to come.
Yeah, well, we don't walk on our floor, on our
we don't
ceilings.
walk on our floors,
I know
but
there was
still.
a song about that once upon a time.
You're showing your age here, bro.
Oh, sorry. But the reality is that's where our 10 mil with a 2 mil oak, which we use successfully for flooring installations
It's
as
perfect.
well, is perfect for that. And I sometimes love to hear a client, on a trade show say, you know what, I'm going to save for an extra year because that's what I really want. And at least that type of client is making the right decision because they know what they want. It adds warmth to the underfoot. It's real wood, and as we said earlier, it adds value to their property.
We've chosen the perfect floor.
Thank you. I hope so.
But planning and project management using any floor type, but I'd say particularly with when you're spending like what you're going to spend with an engineer, you want to make sure that it's protected and safe, and it comes in at the right stage of your project where you can really optimize the longevity of the product, because a lot of products are getting destroyed during that renovation or build phase where potentially they're coming in too early or they're not being respected by other contractors.
Yeah, it drives me mad because always the first question I ask is, would you have put a carpet in at this stage? And no, never. But so why did you put your wood floor? Unfortunately, I think these days it's got a lot to do with how we build and how we have to do draws with our banks. And if, unfortunately, floors are put in too early so they can show the progress on site, which is fine. But if you still got wet works and a whole load of other work and contractors coming in afterwards, please can we use the right protective products out there? Because there's certain products you definitely don't put plastic down. It will sweat, it will damage your floor. So there are some good products in the marketplace that we should invest in and actually build into the cost when we're quoting the clients.
Absolutely. So this is a massive thing. Like, you can't use packaging cardboard. Packaging cardboard does not work. It's too soft. It just sucks in the moisture and it permeates it all the way through. There are protective products out there that you can use that are designed specifically for this situation. But like when you're going and painting and you are doing final skimming, etc., you're also putting a lot of moisture into that environment. And these products are very carefully balanced for the South African climate and for living conditions. And when you are installing these products and then you're putting a whole lot of moisture in and above them, that is abnormal. It can start impacting the products.
100%.
And I think because ultimately these products are getting easier and easier to install.
Yes.
Some of the installers don't necessarily understand the science behind what's actually happening. And that's why when you are purchasing these products, you need to read that instruction manual on the back of the box. And you need to understand how critical site control and the environment, the climate control is. You need to understand how important it is to manage the site control and the climate of this home or wherever you're putting this floor.
And before even we get that far, don't forget to get the product onto site, so acclimatize it, please.
Yeah, well, that's like step one.
Because
acclimation,
most important as well.
So even though it has the super duper with regards to cross-layered structural dimensional stability, it's a natural fiber. It still expands and contracts like we do as we breathe in and out. Our body expands and contracts. So will any natural fiber, including engineered oak. And this you need to take into consideration when you are planning your fixtures and your finishings, that we need to have an expansion gap around any vertical surface. If you're doing a beautiful kitchen island with a nice dropped waterfall, stone countertop or whatever, you need to allow for the weight. And there's all these elements that you need to pre-plan with your flooring installer so that these can be taken into account and they can pre-prepare that we're not going to be locking down the floor in any way or form. Because also I've seen where floors have gone in too early and then all of a sudden big plantation shutters get installed and tracks and locking points and door stops, etc. And now all of a sudden second fix contractors are locking down this floor.
And there's solutions to all of these problems.
Absolutely. It's actually, it's quite basic, but it's also quite horrible on how floors fail so easily and so early on in their lives due to people being unaware and not planning.
Well, I think our industry needs to take a note of that, because it's all very easy to walk into a new empty shell, whether it's an office or a big nice home, wherever it may be, and yeah, it's 200 squares, great, I'm coming in first, install, goodbye, good night, got paid, thank you. And then you get a call 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months down the line, no, we got problems, and the client hasn't even moved in. And exactly that. If we just would have called a site meeting with the kitchen guy, the project manager, the shutter guy, and just ask the question, what is going on top of my floor after I leave? No, we got this, we got that. Okay, right, well, let's have a meeting. We can either, A, put your carcasses in first, leave your side panels and kick plates off, and then we'll put that on afterwards so you're not putting the floor down. Or B, no problem, you can do that, but just to make the hole in our timber floor greater than where it's going to be locked and pinned down, so the floor can still expand and contract, especially if we're floating the floor. So we have to ask the right questions, because ultimately we also have to take a form of responsibility of what's happening afterwards. And I think that separates, a professional flooring supply and installer over someone that just wants to get in, get out, and actually doesn't care what happens afterwards. Because I am the guy that walks into people's houses 3 months, 6 months after living in or moving in, and I just have to shake my head and say I feel sorry for the client, because they just weren't given the correct advice and guidance, and ultimately they end up having to be responsible to get their floor fixed or replaced now. So I think that starts with us when we're from a quoting stage.
Absolutely, and I think that there's a natural roll on into maintenance and repair. So these floors, absolutely, you can maintain and repair them fairly easily. And it is about understanding the coating system, and it is a natural fiber, that there is a methodology on how you go about doing that. And with regards to repair, it's actually quite easy to repair these products if you know how. Sasha, thank you. And guys, I hope you've learned something with this video. Really, there's a world of product out there and there's a world of choices out there. But South Africa is quite unique in our skill levels, and I think when you have an opportunity to gain access to a product range that has full national coverage support, it's a stock item, there's security in that. Go about your procurement and your purchasing informed, because that's how you're going to make great flooring decisions. Thank you, Sasha.
Correct. Thank you for having me today, and look forward to our next video. And please subscribe and hit the bell.